Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. And we will be talking about 6 decades of a love affair. And my guests this evening are Jules, Elias, and Renee, Elias.
Good evening.
And I'm a little nervous. I'm always nervous. I've been doing this for 16 years. How are you? Are you nervous now?
No.
No, that really bothers me. I'm the only one nervous and you're not.
I gave that up for my 70th birthday.
Really? 70th? That's a while, huh?
That was a while ago.
Yeah. And as you know, the show goes in 2 major parts. The first part is the bio, like who are you, so people have an idea where you're coming from when you talk about other things. And then we'll get specifically, I've got a bunch of prompting questions I got from you, there's a few of my own too, about what this title means, 6 decades of a love affair. Okay. So shall we get started?
Absolutely.
Go for it.
All right, so Renee, shall we start with you?
Okay, what do you want to know?
I want to know, where were you born?
Brooklyn, New York.
I'm not supposed to ask a lady when was that, but you said 70 years ago.
No, it's going to be 80 in a few days.
Oh my gosh, that's phenomenal.
Yes.
Look at you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can I ask you my favorite trick question?
What? No, my dog is at home.
Where's the dog?
They didn't come with us.
Okay. Why were you born?
Why was I born?
That's my trick question. You ready?
Okay. I can answer it a couple of times. Because my mom and dad loved each other. I had a physical relationship. And here I am.
And here you are. All right. And your full name?
Renee, Elias. I don't have a middle name. We were too poor.
Too poor. That should be interesting. Oh my gosh. And anything significant about your racial, national, or cultural heritage that the viewers would be curious about?
Well, I was born into a sort of Jewish ghetto in East New York. Although it was a little mixed because we had Italian families, we had Irish families, a few black families on the block in the area. But I think mostly it was a Jewish area. And I learned very early that I didn't fit. You know,
What did that mean? What do you mean you didn't
I
fit?
felt that the expectations that I was being raised with, although my mother was a very bright woman, unusually well educated for her time, but the culture expected me to be a certain kind of good girl, and I just never felt that I was that good girl. So I began to read my way out of it.
Read your way out of it.
Learned how other lives were led, what possibilities there were. And then I made the mistake of reading the Bible. And it made absolutely no sense. And of course that divided me even more from, you know, people amongst who I lived. So basically I was a misfit.
So it's hard to identify a specific culture.
Emotionally and family, I'm Jewish. There's no getting away from it.
Yeah.
World War II, all my father's family were killed. We never knew what happened to them. I saw my father change when he began to realize what happened. So my emotions are with them, but my intellect is not with any religion.
I can be empathetic for a lot of things, but the kind of stuff you're talking about, I can't go there.
Yeah.
I can only wildly guess, but I wouldn't even try to do that
Yeah.
because it would be goofy.
It would.
Yeah. So let's continue on. Do you have a religious preference today?
I'm an atheist. I'm not. I don't fudge it. I don't say I'm an agnostic. I'm an atheist. I've been an atheist for most of my life.
That's a pejorative. I always say atheist.
Atheist. I like that. I like that. Yes.
Yeah. And how about your formal education?
I got I got a BA from Brooklyn College in English, an MA in English. And then a few years later, when Jules was at Stony Brook, I went back to school and got a Bachelor of Science in Cardiopulmonary Services. I've been an English teacher, I've been a respiratory therapist, and I've been a science editor.
Oh my gosh.
I've had an interesting life.
Yeah, I can see your brain pulsing right now.
Yeah. I get a headache sometimes.
Interesting, yeah. And so what'd you do in those years you've been married to Jules? Did you have a regular job or a teacher or what?
Well, when we got married, I worked, he went to school. Then he worked and I had babies. Then we both worked. And then he retired, I worked a couple more years, and then I retired. So it's been a back and forth all our marriage.
So what are you doing now to bring in some extra money or something because you're retired? You're apparently very wealthy, I can see.
Oh, yeah. We are wealthy. We are wealthy because we have the life we want to lead. We have enough to live the life we lead. Our children talk to us. They even want to be with us. We have wonderful grandchildren. And we're pretty much connected after all this time. So we are wealthy.
Yeah, sounds like it. There's a lot of stories I'm sure you have. And as I was suggesting, we're going to need 3 hours to cover what's going on with you, based on some of the stuff you showed me so far. And you mentioned 2 daughters. Any sons?
Yes, our son Leonard, who was an executive chef, and he's in Peachtree City, Georgia. But now he's working in a hospital as, I'm not quite sure the title, but he's developing the new menus and food services for this hospital. So they're trying to come into healthier foods. It's amazing, a hospital that wants to come into healthier foods. So that's what he's doing now.
Are your kids as bright as you two are?
Our kids are wonderful.
They're brighter.
Yeah. Your political persuasion, left, right, center,
Left.
Tea Party?
Left.
Yeah, so am I, of course. Yeah. Any memberships in civic political organizations that are worth mentioning? Sometimes people do mention them.
You know what I'm going to say? I'm like Groucho Marx. I wouldn't belong to any organization that would have me as a member. Yeah, I'm not a joiner. What I do, I prefer to do privately. You know, we have the charities that we like, and we support those. But I just can't work through organizations. I don't play well with other people. So.
We're going to leave you pretty quick and go someplace else. But I want to be sure. Oh, persons from the past are alive today that you look up to or admire. Any names come to mind?
Alive?
Or dead, either one. Any heroes?
I'm a skeptic. I don't really have heroes. I think everybody has feet of clay. Oh, you caught me with that one. I'm going to have to think about it.
That's the purpose of the question.
I'm going to have to think about those who I admire. Politically, not many people. Abraham Lincoln is.
Okay, we got one.
I got one. I got Abraham Lincoln. Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah.
I admire her tremendously. Yeah.
This is going to be a kumbaya affair with similar political and social.
You're not going to make me cry.
I hope not.
And sympathy.
Okay. Somewhere we're going to talk about these books here. Shall we start talking about them now, or shall we talk to you first a little bit?
Whatever you care to do. You can talk to me first and
talk to him.
Lay the groundwork for what's going to come.
Of course. Then can I ask you your first trick question?
Sure.
If I were to ask your best friend, who is Jules? What would your best friend say? Be your best friend. Jules is what?
A nice guy.
Uh-huh. Jules is a nice guy. Is that all she'd
I
say?
already wrote my epitaph. I used to say, I was talking to one of the pianists that I perform with,
Uh-huh.
and I said, you know what they're going to say? He worked too hard and sort of brought his demise on earlier than necessary because he was so keen on doing everything absolutely right. But at the end of the day, he was really a nice guy.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. Yeah.
And are you the same age as Renee?
2 years older.
2 years older. Oh my gosh. 92?
82. You're as bad in math as I was. That's why I went into medicine. If you don't do well in math, you go into medicine.
Yeah. And similar cultural heritage? And
Yes and no. Born in Brooklyn, but in my case, born in the house. My grandmother from Greece was the midwife, and the general practitioner delivered us, who took care of the family at all times. And yes, we were Sephardic. We did not speak Yiddish. We had our own ghetto. There were 3 temples, Sephardic temples, and near each other, a block apart, all from 3 different towns, Castoria, Monastir, Inglaterra. And they had their own 3 rabbis. They all talked to each other. They intermarried, but it was very tribal in terms of who we were. And we sang the same songs in temple, but it was very, as I said, it was a safe upbringing. We didn't know how much we were missing. We were so circumscribed from the rest of the world. No cars, no travel, no vacations, no luxuries whatsoever. And everybody knew everybody else's business, and if you got into trouble, the neighborhood closed its ranks and helped you.
mm-hmm.
So I grew up safe,
Okay.
totally safe, in my mind. But I also grew up, there was an undercurrent of knowing that we were not in the mainstream. And the teachers in public school who wore high heels and makeup during the day, and my mother had a house coat on. Every time you saw her dress, if she went to a temple or an affair, and my mother used to look up to them. You got to be like them, she would say. They know how to get through life, and the image was the WASP was the ultimate place to reach for. I imbibed some of that. I did. Mm-hmm. And in some ways it worked for me. Other times, as I went through life, I realized that everything is not what it seems to be. And the same foibles exist on all sides of the aisle. They have as many issues as we have, and the usual spectrum.
But they're
Is Elias a Greek name?
Yes, it is.
I thought so, yeah.
It's a biblical name. If you went to Sweden, it would be Eliasberg. If you went, Germany, Eliasberg. If you went to Sweden, it would be Elias' son. It's very, very common name. Yeah.
You're an educated man.
Yeah.
Religious preference the same as your wife?
It was gradual. I almost felt I was deceived a little bit because she wasn't that obvious about it in the beginning. But she let me do my very orthodox thing. And up until about 10 years ago, I belonged to the Sephardic Temple on Barbara Boulevard, that little round rotunda place there.
Yeah.
And I still miss it. It's not the praying. Praying was nice. It was very rote. It's the fellowship and the singing together. That's why when I give lectures on aging, I say if you go to a mosque or a temple or a synagogue, whatever it is, it's the fellowship, the singing, and the participation in your happy and sad events with a critical mass being there. You're not alone. So there is a hidden benefit from the obvious. You pray, and that's a private matter. And to this day, I'm so grateful that we landed where we did. I'm a contradiction. I mean, I thank God in my mind, even though I don't believe that there's a deity per se. And I know what I know about the origins of life. And so it's an emotional thing. I mean, I grew up in a very superstitious, Spanish superstitious. I had hand-me-down clothes for my rich relatives. And there was the high holy days, and I was wearing this very expensive-looking clothes. It didn't fit quite right, but good enough. And before I leave the house, my mother would put salt in my back pocket. And why did she do that? There's an expression called kanahara. You don't want anybody looking at you and say, where did they get the money to buy that kind of clothing when, in fact, they were hand-me-downs? So I imbibed a little of that. in my sense of being, and of course the aura of life in general. You know, the aura of just looking at a bacteria under a microscope and looking at Brownian movement. You know what Brownian movement is? You look at a single microbe and it's shaking under, and you're wondering what's going on there. You know, it's just one cell doing all of that. Yeah. Very, very awesome situation. And so I dug my heels into this and made it my work, and I got good at it. And I must say, I default to her. I would not, all of this would not be here because of her support of my thinking that I wasn't quite up to the academic potential that I had in me that she saw.
Formal education, say a few words about that.
Okay, so I had a bachelor's degree from the same college in biology, a master's degree in biology with a specialty in hematology, blood, from Long Island University, CW Post College, and a doctorate, a combined Stony Brook University Union Institute. My faculty was at Stony Brook because that's where I was. And my thesis, I didn't bring my thesis book, but I published a book on the beginning of this whole new field, which is a field that relates to something called monoclonal antibodies, where they can determine where a tumor came from because the unique protein of that tissue, like a thyroid, went to the tumor when it metastasized, and there was no way of identifying it in a normal way. But if you had an antibody to thyroglobulin, which is made in the thyroid, and it's the only place where it's made in the thyroid, you can be sure that the primary site was the thyroid. So I was at the forefront of that, and I was one of the 2 labs in the country who was teaching that. So it gave me a lot of PR and a lot of exposure. Yeah.
Where'd you get your brains from?
My mother. I will say my mother. Incredible lady.
Yeah.
She and my mother and a whole bunch of other women of their generation, I think of them as the lost women. They were immigrants. They came here. They had to make a life through their families and their husbands. They never got what they should have achieved. But then, of course, I'm a feminist, so I would be looking at it that way. And the expectations that were thrown on them, they couldn't look young. They couldn't look, after they married, they couldn't look sexy. They couldn't be bright. They couldn't be this. They couldn't be that. And the older I get, the more I feel for them and see what their lives were like. And yes, his mommy was a smart cookie, but she had no place to show it. Like my mother, they were depressed. I mean, really depressed women.
How long have you been a feminist?
I think I was born a feminist.
I
have to agree with that.
I don't remember not being a feminist. I was a scrawny little kid with buck teeth and long hair, and it just felt wrong. It was just wrong, so.
Well, needless to say, she is so pro-Hillary that I get a semi-lecture almost every night. And what I'm missing as a male was being said about her, and how the canards that are thrown at her in ways that are so sexist.
Oh, yes.
And so unbelievable that in this time and place that we could do that in a public venue and feel you're on safe ground. Boy, it's not too good.
And I'm still learning my remaining tendencies to be chauvinistic sometimes.
Yeah.
And if you like me enough, you'll tell me that it was a chauvinist remark, and gives me a chance to keep learning.
Yeah.
I got a whole history of from the time I was that small, living that crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
The stuff we
think
get
about
thrown at us.
Yeah.
In my Sephardic temple, the women were kept upstairs.
Mine too.
When we were in Gibraltar,
Really?
and I looked for a Sephardic temple, and I found it, and I wanted to go to. They said, come in the evening, it'll be open. I came there. Not only were the women upstairs, with my temple, they were upstairs, but you could see them, and they could look down at us. They were behind a wall that had holes in it, so you couldn't see them from downstairs. Yeah, so is, if you have that as a backdrop, you can see how the schism that was put between the genders, and how, as she pointed out, the women had to follow a certain decorum, otherwise they would be in trouble. They had to follow that very much so.
Yeah, women would sit on the bench and talk about any woman who didn't fall into their
acceptable range.
In their range of what was acceptable. And they were doing things you wouldn't even think about today, you know, wearing stockings of a different color or higher heels than you thought somebody else should wear, or a nice looking dress, you know. And my mother had my father, when he came here, he was a farm boy back in Hungary. But he came into the city, New York, and he was a dressmaker. And he worked for some good houses. And he would bring my mother home the most wonderful dresses. And she had closets full of wonderful dresses. She had no place to wear them. Where could she wear them? Yeah. So I remember my mother wearing house dresses. And this is a story I sometimes tell. My grandfather, who I believe, my paternal grandfather, was a socialist. And he would take me from the time I was 5 years old with him to their meetings. We'd go on the BMT, and we'd go rattling along to this apartment of a woman I only knew as the teacher. And she wore heels and a lovely dress and stockings, and she smelled of cologne. And I said, that's what I want. And I didn't see that at home. So
it's different now than it was then.
Oh, yeah. It's different, but it breaks my heart because I see too many young girls are not taking advantage of what was given to them and worked for. So I'm going to have to fight that fight all over again.
Interesting. So somewhere along the way, you learned how to love and love fellow human beings and love family. I can sense it in how you are and how you look at me. And I'm still learning. That's why I have these kinds of signs to remind me of being more loving and more kind like that.
That's Jules. I, by tendency, have a tendency to be a hermit. I live a lot in my head, you know, in my own things. Jules has always been, or seemed to have been, much more social than I have. So I sort of got dragged along with him. But I like people as individuals. I like you. I like the people I like as people, then I tend to be with them and let them in. And we're very family oriented. I think we're rewarded. You know, there's a sign that your grandchildren are your reward for not killing your own children. It was, you know, they were difficult, but it was worth it. If you hang in long enough, they become real people. And they're nice people. You know Fiamma. They're nice people. They're good people. They're ethical people.
To back up that statement about the family is central to our happiness.
Okay.
So for my 80th birthday, everybody was saying, what do you want? I said, I have everything. I said, but what I would like is a big blanket with pictures of everybody. Individual families, we have 3 separate children families, all the grandsons together. And they had a photographer come in the house, took all these and we have a living room that's like a museum with sculpture and art, and it's just beautiful. A lot of her art and art we purchased. So what we have on a wall, half the wall of the bedroom, I'm laying in bed and I could see it, is this big, colorful blanket of different pictures of the family. Then I have individual pictures that we had done way back when of our core family when they were young, right next to that. And yeah, I've got a lot of things. I'm listed in this year's Who's Who for my work in breast cancer. It's okay, but that's it. If that isn't right, the rest is all commentary.
Got to ask you one more question, and then we're going to expand it and talk about this stuff here.
Sure.
Some more. Heroes, people you look up to from the past, or alive today. Any names come to mind for you?
Well, it's kind of interesting. You were there Sunday, and this woman giving this talk about what's happening with the public education system at the Humanist Society.
Yeah.
And when I looked at the listing for LBJ, a Southern boy, who, that list went on, and what wasn't up there was the Civil Rights Act, which was a momentous occasion in this country.
Southerner.
From a Southern guy who you would leave, he's the epitome of throwing out the idea that generalizations work. They don't work. He broke every rule because he saw the obvious when he was a school teacher. And he saw the sadness in the poor kids' faces, and he went ahead and did the right thing. A humanist concept. Not what you believe in, it's what you do. He did it. So I don't love the man, but I look up to what he had the courage to do. FDR was, when I was growing up, in terms of Social Security and getting the country back on track, when he died, we were all crying in my family. We didn't know why. It was incredible. What an impact he had on us. But in retrospect, it turned out that he wasn't that good with the exodus and people who were trying to escape and letting them in here, and they closed the door on that. So it sort of what goes around comes around. It's the same thing with the immigrant situation now. Where do you cut? Who do you accept? It's never easy. If you want to be totally humanistic, you'd say there's no barriers whatsoever, but I don't know.
And for me, I need to consider what's possible.
What's possible?
Yes.
The practical aspects of it.
Yeah, because for a while I was angry with Obama because there were things about him that he didn't do, or he should have been more humane or loving, and he wasn't. But then lately I've been thinking, like Pope Francis.
Yes.
There's certain things he can do. And I'm considering those kinds of people who I've looked up to through the years.
Yes.
And rethinking what I've thought about it before. Yeah. And I like repeating myself sometimes, considering what they're capable of doing.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him, because I kid around with my very Irish author, a very devout Irish Catholic
daughter-in-law
who told me before they got married to us.
I was an altar boy for years.
She said, I'm raising them Catholic. I said,
Go for it.
Whatever works for you. And we've been to church for any number of confirmations and whatever, praying with them. And I said to my daughter-in-law, if Pope Francis was around at a certain time in my life and I heard what he was saying, he may have converted me. Because the reason I left the religion also is it's very incestuous. A stained glass window is great and all the thing, and it's practical. Pay for a school, train the kids in the culture. But it's the real problems of the world that I wanted to be involved in. And until you extend yourself out there, you're not accomplishing too much. The immediate community is getting something out of it. Nothing is all. But I was frustrated that they didn't go beyond. The church. Some of the churches in this town walk their talk. There's the sandwich ministry. We're going around giving out sandwiches to people who are hungry. And the soup kitchens, they're walking their talk. It's not. Again, it's not across the board thinking for any one group.
So let's take a break, and then we'll go into the second half of the show, and we'll talk about this stuff here and see where it goes. And I've still got those prompting questions I got to ask you, because I'm saving that, because that's a. Take a break, Mr. Director, please. So I was talking a little too soon here, and for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, thanks for staying tuned. And Conversations with Dr. Don that you're watching right now is a 1-hour episode of a series, and we talk about what my guests want to talk about and whatever else comes up. And we have 6 decades of a love affair. We've been saving that for last. That's the best part. And my guests are Jules and Renee, Elias. And I'm not remembering a couple who seem to be so simpatico or so together as a unit as you two.
We've been accused of that. We've been accused of having no boundaries by a psychologist that we saw way back. Oh,
Did you straighten them out?
She said, "You guys have no boundaries."
Too close.
Oh my God. Yeah. And so now we were going to talk about this books you've got there. I'm curious about those too. I didn't realize when I invited you on the show before that you had all these other interests in depth. And I'm getting myself kind of in a little better position to be open to experiencing more of what you're really about, in addition to being a fine clarinetist.
Thank you.
Are we going to talk about your clarinet?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
that's a great story unto itself, the clarinet, if you want to hear that.
It's up to you.
Oh, sure. I'll tell you a quick synopsis of how that happened. Immigrant parents, Christmas, New York City, Wurlitzer, the big music store. All the instruments dressed up with red ribbons, and it's Christmas. Beautiful. I'm 13 years old, and that black licorice stick is staring at me in the face. And I tell my father, I want to learn how to play that, and if you get it for me, I will learn how to play Greek music so you and Mom could dance. And he said, we'll see. It was like $125. They bought it with 3 years to pay it. And the first 10 lessons were 50 cents a lesson, then they went up to $1 a lesson. And I would practice literally, I started a half-hour a day and 1 hour a day, and by the time I got to high school, I was doing 4 hours a day. Practicing. Of course, nobody went to college. Everybody learned a trade, got a job close by, married a neighborhood gal, and started a family, and ate together. That was the perspective of how you succeed in this life. Well, long story short, I didn't do that. My older brother said, go to an academic. You never know, someday you'll go to college. Didn't do well the first year, joined during the Korean War. Met her on a blind date on one of my weekends at home. Took my clarinet on board a troop ship. Instead of going to Korea, we were going to the line between Russia, the Cold War line that existed.
Germany.
Berlin Wall?
Well,
German,
it was in southern
Black
Germany, in
Forest.
Bavaria.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I lied to my mother, first time I ever really lied, because I had gotten injured slightly in basic training. I had advanced training. I was a rifleman. And I was a lefty, so the rifles were made only for right-handed people, and I'd get blasted in the face every time I shot it. So I said, Mom, here's my clarinet. It's in my duffel bag. Not to worry. I'm in the band. Get on a troop ship. I meet a bunch of other guys, and there were some Greek fellows on there who were in there with the understanding that if you finish your service and had an honorable discharge, within 90 days you got citizenship with a little preparation. That's the value that was so important to them. And of course, I knew how to play Greek music. Met other people. Long story short, we form a USO-type show. Have to do it twice because there was enough room for 1,300 troops. Above the ship are the officers, their wives, their dogs, their kids, the regular guys, who are going there to Germany for 10 years, so they have their furniture, everything. We finished the show, we're putting our instruments away, in comes an orderly, a tin hut. We stop what we're doing, behind him is a lot of shiny stuff on some big guy, and he watches in, he said, boys or men, I'm so proud of you, I never expected this. Is there anything I could do for you? I said, can you try and get us in the band? He said, I'll see what I can do. He turns around, and I asked the orderly, who is that man? General Van Nostrand, Supreme Allied Commander of all troops in Europe. We land in Bremerhaven, we go to the southern part of Germany, ready to go live in a tent for 9 months. The warrant officer of that band comes over. Anybody here want to try out for the 1st Infantry Division Band? 11 of the 12 of us got in to that, and it was all heavenly since then. Clarinet saved my life there. Had a great career, came here. Her mother died, my mother died within 6 months, and they were sorry we left because they were on the East Coast, we were here. I was a doctor in the house. My mother was all upset. I said, Mom, if you need me, I'll get on a plane, don't worry. Well, so I had a lot of guilt, and I was feeling kind of down, and Renee said, why don't you get out your clarinet? And I did, and I had to get it fixed in Beaverton right here in Woodwind Repair, and he did a whole rehab of it, and he said, try it. And he heard me, he said, I can tell you played it one time. And I'm a teacher. I said, I could use some lessons. The rest is history. I got into several orchestras and began playing all over again, and I play everywhere. We'll be in St. John's next month. I give recitals at the old church. So again, the clarinet and her lucid, objective.
It was self-defense. He was so annoying. I had to get him out of the house. He was a downer.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
And I practice every day, even when I'm sick. She said, "You don't have to practice." I said, "No." And that sums up this. I am not as smart as she is. She's a very bright woman. Extremely bright.
Different, though.
I am a worker. And to me, work is pleasure. If I could set a goal for myself and achieve it, however long it takes, I'll do it. Just show me what I have to do, and I'll do it. And I'll do it like, you know, there was a statement, and they said, when you're not practicing, somebody is, or when you're sleeping, somebody else is practicing. So it's not a bad idea to find a place for yourself to do your work. And I don't just practice, I do the work, the scales and the arpeggios, the long tones. A lot of my friends who I got to know 15 years ago are playing the same way. They're good, but they didn't move because they played the music that they're going to perform. I practice the scut work. You know, it's like preparing for a prize fighter. He goes and works out in the gym and does all the exercises and runs around and jumps rope. Well, that's what I did on the clarinet. And you heard me. Mm-hmm. And I'm obsessed about sound. You can play all the right notes, but if it doesn't sound right, who's going to want to listen? So I think I have a good sound. I think it's a nourishing, full, resonant sound. And yeah, I'm giving a very big recital next Tuesday at the Community Music Center. I'm doing a Brahms sonata, which is very difficult, with an excellent pianist. And why am I doing it? It's work, and I got to perform at a certain level, and mainly musicians are sitting there, so their standards are high. So you do have to reach a certain level, but I'm also realistic. You know, things happen in live performance.
I have dreamed that your arms are lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have dreamed what a joy you'd be.
Another one.
Yes. Yes.
I think in terms of song lyrics. I have a head full of song. You too?
Yeah.
I knew there was something about you I liked. Our littlest grandson, it drives him crazy. Because every time he says something, we have a song. I have a song for it. And he pretends. I think he's beginning to enjoy it. He said, "Oh no, not another song. Not another song." Yeah, so yeah, yeah. But I'm so happy somebody else does that. Fantastic. Yeah. But tell
So
him
the
about
book.
these.
So the book. Oh yeah. So the real
stories are so fascinating.
Yeah.
I want to get to something else, but I don't want
Okay.
to leave you with what you're saying because I'm enjoying it.
Well, there are two books here.
Okay.
This one came later. This one was something that I knew when I was first introduced to somebody who wrote a book, and he was quite famous, Charles Culling from Vancouver, British Columbia. I said, "How do you write a book, Charles?" He said, "Just sit down and start writing. But get yourself a good editor." English major, you know, looked over my shoulder. So I began, and I did a first edition for my doctoral thesis. That was my thesis, that book. And some original publications, which got me into Who's Who in America because of what I did in breast cancer.
What's your PhD in?
Immunopathology. Actually, it's immunology with pathology as an emphasis.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, please go on.
Immunology. So I knew then that the passport to, quotes, being categorized as being bright is you write a book. Especially if it takes hold and people use it in a real situation, in a pathology lab, then your name is a very common name. You get invited to lecture, which is where I was on the circuit all over the country, and I go to LA, I call up Clive Taylor, chairman of pathology and UFC, and he said, "Come on over," and I'd give a 1-hour lecture, and he'd give me a $200 honorarium. Because, you know, it was my way of making the money that I wasn't making working for the state. I consult, I lectured, I got a lot of royalties from these books. In fact, he said, "You could have written a third edition." I said, "The clarinet is between that and the third edition. There's no way I can go back to
Can't
my
do
mind
two.
has left it. My mind has left it." So this has chapters on breast cancer, kidney disease, leukemia, which is my expertise, and muscle disease, and how to work up the case. That's why it's a practical approach. So you get the most information from that biopsy. Remember, pathologists are not clinicians.
When did you write this?
Okay. Second edition, 2003. Okay.
So
The first edition was being written while we were getting ready for Fiamma's wedding.
Right. Right.
Yeah, we were doing both at the same time.
Yeah, what I did want to find here is the
size.
Here's the
of
dedication.
Type.
So I walk my talk. Look at the dedication there.
This book is lovingly dedicated to my wife, Renee, who made it possible for me to enjoy the beauty, intelligence, and wit of our grandchildren, Max, Colin, Saxon, and Cooper, by birthing their respective parents. Our children, Leonard, spouse Anne, and Fiamma, spouse James. We look forward to more of the same from future grandchildren by way of Sophia, spouse is Brian.
Yes.
And that was Baby X.
And that was Baby X. Alexander, who was our 11-year-old one. Yeah.
Xander. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay, this story quickly. I'm sitting on we had an MD PhD program, and the faculty had to listen to their presentations and critique them and give them a grade. And it was at the very beginnings of molecular pathology. And it was a language that was foreign to us. To me, science is infinitely simple if you know the language. Just like if you know High German, you know, you can read the literature and feel comfortable with it. Well, if you learn the language of a particular discipline, you're halfway there. We didn't know the language. So I'm talking to colleagues, MDs, PhDs, who were all sitting there saying, either we get off this charge because we couldn't evaluate them fairly, or I learned the language. Well, she got off it. I said, I'm going to learn it. Once I learned it, it was so fascinating, I felt compelled to write a book at a level that would reach people like me who never got formal training because it wasn't available then in our formal education, but would want to get on board. And I'm proud of it because I got so good at giving this information that the biggest societies in molecular pathology would want me to come there and lecture to the basics. When I was in Austria, they flew me over there I was a keynote speaker. I said, you mean you're going to fly me to Austria so I give a talk for 1 hour? I'm not worth it. Nobody's worth it.
What year was this?
Oh, about 10 years
Roughly.
ago. 12 years ago. I was sort of breathing
Time is
out.
getting very fluid now, as we know.
Yes, of course I know.
Yeah.
And he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I'll do a sunrise semester. I'll teach basic pathology, molecular pathology, from 7:30 to 8:30 every morning. He said, what a great idea. It was so well attended. And it was one of the better parts of the meeting. People were so grateful because I prepared them for that day's discussions in ways that they couldn't absorb the information if you couldn't get
just by
the
reading.
landmarks. Yeah, they needed the language. And I knew what they were going to talk about that day, so I built up that knowledge base so they could sit there and listen to these
And
experts.
she's smarter than you? Come on.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
He keeps saying that. It's
yeah.
different.
Yeah.
Different, yeah.
He's the tortoise. He will go, he'll start, and he'll keep walking and walking and walking to get there. I spurt. And then I'll lie down in the shade. And then I spurt. We get there eventually, but we get there differently. So.
Those other two books, we're going to have to leave those because I've got to ask you some
this
questions.
concerns her also.
All right.
When she retired from respiratory therapy, her second
He
profession.
made me retire.
Because that's when AIDS showed up. And I was on the committee for the AMA doing certification of hospitals, and I was in Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City.
Sure.
And they knew I was an expert in hematology, and they asked me to come in and look at the blood. And I'm looking, and I said, oh, these guys have infectious mononucleosis. And they said, no, they don't. I said, they have typical atypical lymphocytes, but they don't have it. I said, what did I have? We don't know, they said. It was the very early stages of AIDS. We didn't even have a name for it. And then about 6 months later, then it began to become apparent. Now, she would do Veni sticks.
No, arterial.
And then arterial sticks, getting blood from obese people.
I was up to my ears in blood.
And she'd come home with a lab coat with some blood on it and spots, and I'd say, okay, give them your notice. I don't think I want you in that environment until we know exactly where things are going.
What was happening was there were suddenly patients in rooms in the hospital under so many precautions that it made you nervous, and you start to gown up and wear masks and wear hats and wear gloves. It's very hard to do arterial sticks wearing gloves. You know, you have to feel that pulse before you, otherwise you're torturing the poor patient. And we didn't really know what was happening, and they didn't tell us a word. We never really knew at first that these people were very infectious. And I actually stuck myself once. So he said, that's it, that's enough, and I quit. So, continue the story.
So, yeah, the editor, previous editor to this, was looking to get down, could not tolerate the pressure of getting an issue out every 3 months. It was a quarterly issue. They offered it to me, and I said, only on my terms. And they said, what do you want? I said, it's too incestuous. You're showing pictures of people at a meeting, and that's not a science journal. And that's a newsletter. I said, if you want a science journal, it's got to be fully respected in the community of scientists, medical scientists. And they said, anything, just take it over, because my track record as a lecturer already preceded me. They knew if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. I can only do it with her as my editor. I said, the other part of the piece is she has to come on as the editor. Sure. And so she made a lateral move, and we took what was essentially a newsletter and turned it into a world-class recognized journal. And I never could have done it without her. I could never have done it without her.
You know, the time has flown by. We've got about 8 or 9 minutes left for these questions. It's just okay. Oh, right. How did the women's movement shape your life?
There wasn't any. When I was growing up, there was no women's movement. I got it by, as I said, my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, take me with him, and I saw women participating with these men in intellectual discussions and looking good, and I wanted to be them. I was very fortunate. I went to Brooklyn College at age 16. I saw a lot of women professors. They were there. They were clever. They had careers. I wanted to be them. But there was no women's movement per se. You just sort of had to make it as you went along. So
that changed your life?
Changed my life, and it was a battle getting to college, let me tell you.
What do you think women have given up since the heyday of the women's movement? What have women given up?
I think they're going backwards.
How's that?
I think they're getting too concerned about how they look. They're becoming too complacent again. They're becoming too compliant again. You know, for heaven's sake, you know, argue. Don't be nice. You know, wear what you want, be what you want, be who you want. And now these new ads for plastic surgery of your vulva.
Yeah.
So that you'll be interesting to some guy. Oh, please. So it's backwards.
Yeah, that's a good illustration.
Oh, it breaks my heart. It really does.
Jules, how has the shape of your life differed from that of your family?
Totally.
Good question.
Totally. The only one who had advanced education. The only one who served in the Army. The only one who had, I bought a house before, in those days, $500 down, and
GI Bill.
Had a GI Bill, GI mortgage.
I remember.
Everything. And their perspective was, and with good reason, when they went to Temple, the people who garnered the most respect are the people who made the most money. Those people who had the money were bowed down to. So they went for the money. My middle brother became COO of JBC Corporation. He became very wealthy. And so I'm totally different. I'm an outlier when it comes to my family, but in a good way. You know, the fact that I can say Dr. Elias when I call in my brother who's in a permanent nursing home kind of thing, and they normally can't get in. I said, this is Dr. Elias. Give me the nursing station, and everything works with that appellation. Again, her. I didn't want to get it. She said, get it. Just get it. So I kid you not.
It was a financial struggle.
Yeah,
you know,
I didn't have the money for the tuition. Yeah.
He was the first to go to college, but the summer when he graduated, and I was pregnant, he went back to work in the garment center, and he pushed a truck. The first one in his family to get a degree, and he pushed a truck through the streets.
To make the money.
He would work 2 jobs to make the money. We did what we had to do.
I got to tell you, an interjection here. I'm the 12th child. I'm the last one.
Woo!
And I'm the only one with a PhD.
Your poor mama.
And most of them didn't even finish high school. This is during the Depression, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So I can identify with you a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm smart enough to know when someone is smarter than me, so I wouldn't take you on in a fight because I'd lose. But you're a very bright man, and you're so human.
Isn't he? He says it honestly, but he is a nice man. He's a good man.
Yeah.
He's not perfect. And he doesn't have to be perfect, because I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect.
What's on your bucket list? We're going to cut these questions short.
I want to give the best clarinet recital that a 90-year-old ever did in this town, and I'm preparing myself for it now. I will practice the next 8 years and get everything at the highest possible level and stay healthy so I can do it. Health is part of anything you do. You must maintain your health. I'm writing a autobiography on growing up Sephardic in Brooklyn, which I want my children and grandchildren to have, because there's no frame of reference. There's no history. That's what we feel bad about. There's no history. If we were on roots, they'd have nowhere to go with us, because there's no, it's all destroyed. There's no background. You can't go back on us. So, and to stay connected to her in ways that I'm the only male that ever is near her side. I want to be with her as long as possible. Yeah.
All these years. And your bucket list, Renee?
You know, we've done so many things. We've traveled in so many wonderful places. I wrote a poem about him. Because of him, I can be a butterfly. I can go and do and flutter. And he sees me. He knows who I am. He lets me be me. And I create art. I write poetry. I don't have to do anything. If I sat there and read all day, he wouldn't care. I guess I want to live long enough to see one of my grandchildren get married. They don't get married.
Well, this is a worthwhile joke. You can put it in or not.
Yeah.
Grandson number 10, Colin, the Irish guy.
Number 2.
We're talking, and I'm saying, I got to stay healthy because I want to see where you guys are going to go. And he says, well, Grandpa, you're going to live to 100. I said,
I
Colin,
have to.
I have to. It's the only way I'm going to see a great-grandchild. Maybe you'll get married in the next couple of years. You're going with this woman for 10 years. Okay, so yeah, he said, yeah, that was funny. I have to live to 100 so I can see his walking down the aisle, and she and I would dance, because we're ballroom dancers. We never got into that. We're very good ballroom dancers. We danced on cruises. People came to the place where we danced on just to watch us dance. We were that good.
And you're still dancing.
Oh yeah, we're still dancing. Yeah.
Few aches and pains afterward, but we danced.
Yeah, we went to the goodbye party for Norman Lydon. Remember, he was the conductor of the Oregon Symphony, and he did a Pops Orchestra, and he was a clarinetist. And we went to dance, and we got on the floor, and all the musicians who were not playing the music came out and said, look at them, look what they're doing.
No, because not that we're great, it's because we dance as though we like each other and want to be dancing together.
Yeah, no, the music training imparts itself to the rhythm connection to the music. The choreography is natural to me. I know how to end a phrase dancing and start dancing another step when the music changes. They think, it's so wonderful that we move in sync with the different harmonies of a particular
What do
song.
you regret? Any regrets?
I'm like Edith Piaf. I regret nothing. Everything that I have done in my life has brought me to here, and I love being here. So how can I regret anything? Maybe I regret that I can't do more for the world, but who can? And I regret that maybe I can't do as much for my children, but they've got to make their own way too. They know I'm here for them, and if they need help, they'll ask. But I can't make the world better for them.
They're fortunate to have you.
I like them. We're fortunate to have them.
How about regrets for Jules?
Well, it's a very sensitive. I wish I was holding my mother's hand when she left this earth.
Yeah. Okay.
That's another story. Total. Yeah.
So we better wind down because my director's going to yell at me.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
There's so much more to talk about, and in the future, somehow or other, I want to follow and see what you're about and stay in touch with you. So deucedly interesting, and I'm as honest as I know how to be. Thank you so much for coming on the show and.
We've enjoyed being with you.
Well, it was easy to talk to you.
And I learned so much about you.
And I knew, that's why we're here. I knew intuitively that we would have an easy time here. And it was. Yeah.
A couple of PSAs, Mr. Director, public service announcements to fill in the end here and see what's going on, what's important to tell the viewers. To watch my shows on the web, go to Don Baham YouTube. There's hundreds of them on there. Click on a particular show. And you're going to be up on the web in about 3 or 4 more days. I'll call and let you know and be on YouTube.
Okay.
And you can tell your friends to watch it.
Sounds wonderful.
And, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, that's my favorite. Without that, the ACLU, our civil liberties would be in the toilet by now.
We've been members for 40 years.
Or something like that. Yeah. Even though sometimes they have my teeth on edge, but they have to do what they have to do.
I have to say one more thing.
Yes, sir.
To you.
We are sustaining members of the Oregon Food Bank.
Okay.
We got a letter saying we just gave, at this point, and gave 6,000 meals in all the years that we've been giving it.
We're proud of them.
Now, that money goes to children of not a particular ethnic or racial or national background. That's humanism.
Yes.
I'm not just giving to so-called my kind. Walking the talk.
Okay, we're going to have to stop now, and I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my guests as much as I did this evening. And remember KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you too. And you too. And thanks, Jimmy Moglia, for helping out tonight, stepping in because we lost one of our crew. And that's when our show was produced here, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you and good night.